Hey, this is Dr. Josh Matthews. Welcome to my Philosophy of Movies channel. In this video, I'm going to give you many recommendations about the great director, Werner Herzog, a man who is great at feature films and documentaries. He's one of the rare directors who can do both excellently. Now, you might be asking, who is Werner Herzog? Maybe some of you don't know, but I think most people actually know him. They know him from his documentary voice.
All these majestic creatures were filmed by Timothy Treadwell, who lived among wild grizzlies for 13 summers.
Herzog's documentary voice is almost as famous as Morgan Freeman's. It's maybe second, maybe third to Orson Welles, but it's way up there. What makes Herzog so captivating? I think it's his earnestness in exploring subject matters that no one or very few dare to explore in film. One of the things that Herzog is known for is showing you images, showing you scenes or people that you've never seen in a movie. He is, every time he makes a movie, whether he makes a great one, a good one, or a terrible one, going to show you something you've never seen before. That's why Herzog is worth pursuing. And he's not interested in gory violence. He's not interested in sex. Sometimes those things come up in his movies as subjects, but those things aren't as interesting to him as showing you, say, the Lascaux cave paintings, or Antarctica, or some really interesting person who's on the edge between sanity and insanity. Herzog loves subject matters that are weird and strange, but they are sort of familiar, or they don't seem insane or crazy to us. They're right on the edge between madness and sanity. That's what I love about Herzog, is that in his feature films and his documentaries, he's pretty consistent and has been over 40 years, 40 plus years, in showing us images and things that are sort of beyond our grasp, yet film captures and sort of makes us empathetic with. I think Herzog's view of nature is really interesting. To me, he's the heir to Stanley Kubrick, and he's a slightly more humane Stanley Kubrick. He does love humans, I think, more than Kubrick did, but he has that sort of awe and fear of nature, capital N, like Kubrick did. That is, nature is a thing that from a distance looks beautiful, but if you get too close to it, like a grizzly bear, a volcano, Antarctica, a deadly fire in the Kuwaiti oil fields, all those things are beautiful from a distance, but if you get too close to them, they'll kill you. And Herzog wants to show that humans' place in nature is fragile, that we are not as powerful and as all-knowing as we think we are, that there are lots of mysteries in the natural world. There's a lot we cannot control. We're basically the little ants marching around the earth. And Herzog's point of view comes from that, I think, and that point of view has spanned throughout 40 years. So let me tell you what I think his top 10 movies are. Let's start with number 10. Number 10 is going to be controversial. I'm going to subvert typical top 10 lists for Herzog. Aguirre, Wrath of God. This is a 1972 movie starring Klaus Kinski, one of Herzog's favorite actors to use. And it's basically a movie about Spanish explorers who go to the New World, South American jungle, in circa 1700 or 1600, and they're looking for the lost cities of gold, as the Spanish did. Now, Herzog uses this not to show you a historical film, they give you ideas of what it's like to be sort of an insane European going to some foreign place trying to colonize it, as he does in Aguirre, Wrath of God. These Spanish explorers, played by Germans, and this movie's in German, descend from the mountain, they wear armor, but they're in an environment that just swallows them up. They think they're going to be awesome, they think they're going to be powerful and control it, but they have no hope. Now, this movie is probably Herzog's first great feature film. It's one with Klaus Kinski, an actor who was just as bizarre and interesting as any of the subject matters that Herzog would pursue in any movies. We should say a word about Klaus Kinski in this movie. He is a force of nature. He is a great actor as far as the emotions of rage and sort of controlled insanity. Herzog used him many times. It's amazing that Herzog knew him in his youth. Go watch Klaus Kinski in any Herzog movie. He's got 5 of them. I've only got 2 on my list. Other critics like other Herzog-Kinski collaborations, such as Fitzcarraldo. I prefer the movie that's my number 2 on the list, which you'll have to see. But Kinski is really interesting to watch. Also watch Herzog's documentary on Kinski, My Best Fiend.
Das Pulver! Es hat Feuer gefangen! Weg da! Es geht gleich in die Luft!
Number 9 on my list is 1 hour long. It's a documentary, but it's got really great, fascinating images. Lessons of Darkness. Herzog went to Kuwait circa 1991, the burning of the Kuwaiti oil fields when the nation of Iraq invaded Kuwait. He takes images of it from helicopters, and they are magnificent and terrorizing at the same time. Critics have been upset at Herzog for what they call aestheticizing or making beautiful something that is horrific. But that's part of Herzog's point. In fact, he's talking about what's called the Romantic Sublime. In the Romantic Sublime, you see something from a distance and you're awestruck by it, you're amazed, but it's a thing that is devastating. It's a force of nature that no one can control, like a hurricane or the Arctic or the Antarctic or a big desert or a black hole. These things are interesting to Herzog because they show us that humans are puny in the universe and that we are almost on an alien planet. And that's the way Herzog approaches Lessons of Darkness, a really fascinating documentary that I think anybody would appreciate. Number 8 is another documentary. It's one about Texas, the capital punishment system in Texas. It's called Into the Abyss. Herzog goes to film prisoners and their murderers, and he tries to do sort of a real crime story, a true crime story. This documentary is not that. It's almost a religious documentary, one about suffering. Why do we suffer? Why does God make us suffer? It's actually the first scene in this film is a pastor talking about why God allows suffering, why God would allow capital punishment. There are a lot of mysteries in this movie, including who actually committed the murders. None of the guilty parties will confess to it. Nobody seems to know. And this movie has a strange ending. Herzog loves strange endings, so that's another reason to go watch him. Into the Abyss. Number 7 on my list, and yet another documentary, is one Herzog made early in his career. It's I think, his first great movie, Land of Silence and Darkness. It's about deaf-blind people in Germany, and people who went deaf-blind early in their lives, and say 9 years old, 15 years old. This is an amazing movie about what it is like to be deaf-blind. And Herzog even uses the camera to get us to empathize with these people. And one of the paradoxes of this movie is that we're looking at these people who cannot look at us. And can the camera really help us understand who they are and how they exist? I don't know. It's a vexing sort of question that this documentary brings up. Really interesting. Go watch it.
Das ist so, man meint Taubheit, da ist völlige Stille. Oh nein, da irrt man sich. Es ist ein ständiges Geräusch im Kopf. Vom leisesten Klingeln, vielleicht so wie Sandrausch, Rieseln, dann Knacken. Das Schlimmste aber ist, wenn es dröhnt im Kopf, dass man nicht mehr weiß, wo man den Kopf hinwenden muss. Das ist eine große Qual für uns. Darum ist man auch manchmal so gereizt und man kann sich nicht mehr helfen. Genauso wie es auch bei der Blindheit ist. Es ist nicht völlige Dunkelheit. Es sind oft ganz eigenartige Farbtöne vor den Augen. Schwarz, grau, weiß, blau, grün, gelb, je nachdem.
Number 6 is a movie I think anybody would like. I think anybody probably from age 13 on would be vested in this movie. Little Dieter Needs to Fly. Now Herzog was so interested in this subject matter, which is about a native German who went to the United States, enlisted in the U.S. Air Force, and then ran bombing missions over Vietnam during the Vietnam War. He was so invested in the story, he not only made this documentary, but he made a feature film called Rescue Dawn with Christian Bale in it. That also redoes the Dieter story. But Little Dieter Needs to Fly, I think, is better as a documentary because Dieter is great on camera. Herzog identifies with him, and it's just a weird story. It's also a POW story that I think is really captivating. So go watch this.
It was a ridge on the right-hand side. There was a lot of trees, as I said. There was an enormous tree in front of me, and just before I hit it, I kicked full right rudder. The airplane yawed to the right. There was an impact on the left wing. It snapped this thick tree off, and of course then the left wing went back. Then the entire tail, the rudder, horizontal stabilizer, everything just tumbled by. I clearly remember the canopy start cracking in the lower left-hand corner, just like slow motion. It was cracking, it ripped off, then my helmet was jerked off my head. And then the airplane started to cartwheel. And
Number 5 is a weird movie that I don't recommend to everybody, but I myself really appreciate it. It's Strosek. The subtitle is a ballad, and I think that subtitle is very important because most ballads that I know are pretty depressing and they end in disaster. This movie is about a German who is sort of a tramp figure, like a Charlie Chaplin even, in Berlin in the 1970s, and he's friends with a prostitute and an old man. Neither of these three people can make it in the world, and so they decide 45 minutes into the movie to go to America and try to live out the American dream. On the one hand, this is an immigrant story, and on the other hand, it's a fish out of water story, Germans moving to America circa the 1970s. And this movie has one of the most bizarre endings you can possibly imagine. This movie must be watched just for the last 5 minutes. I will not promise it's happy, but I will promise it will be as weird as you can possibly imagine. And I think the ending is really profound as it turns out. So go write to me and maybe I'll do a video on it because I'm really fascinated by Strosek and its ending.
Sabine war ein Frauenzimmer gar fromm und tugendhaft. Sie diente immer treu und redlich bei ihrer Diensterschaft. Bis zu einem bestimmten Tag.
Number 4 is a great movie, and I think it could be number 1 on my list. In fact, the next 4 movies, my top 4 in this top 10 list could be mixed around and in any order. I really feel like all 4 of these are great. The Enigma of Caspar Hauser. This is a story set in 19th century Germany about a man who was raised in a prison cell. He has never been a part of society. He doesn't know how to talk or write. And one day his captive, his master, his father, takes him out and dumps him in a town square. What would happen if someone was raised in a jail cell, basically a prison, and they were just dumped into society at the age of 30 or 35? That's what this movie explores, and it explores the oddities of Caspar Hauser himself and of society. Big fish out of water tale. Caspar Hauser, as the title says, is an enigma. Can we even understand him? Us being raised in a society with its conventions, can we understand somebody who is basically a total alien figure? This is kind of like Forrest Gump, only this is a way better version of Forrest Gump, and it would become the sort of tale that Herzog would like to tell. This movie is from the early 1970s. Herzog loves to talk about these kinds of characters who don't fit into society at all, and how do they make it in the world? How do they make it in the universe?
In unserer Stadt konnte weder gehen noch sprechen. Offensichtlich hatte er noch keinen lebendigen Menschen bis dahin gesehen. Meine Damen und Herren, seine Herkunft ist nach wie vor unbekannt. Ist er ein Prinz? Oder stammt er sogar von Napoleon ab?
Number 3 is like number 4. It's about a man who doesn't fit into society. It's the great documentary Grizzly Man. Oh my goodness, I love this movie to death. It's so amazing for a lot of reasons. For one, Herzog found this footage of a man who went to the Alaskan wilderness and befriended grizzly bears. Timothy Treadwell goes to Alaska and he shoots footage of himself basically petting grizzly bears, trying to become their best friends. That's weird in and of itself. Then Herzog gets the footage and becomes a character in his own documentary. We know that Treadwell has died at the hands of the grizzly bears, but he lived in Alaska for a long time and actually made it pretty well with the grizzly bears. Well, Herzog examines this from his own point of view. You get multiple points of view on whether it's great that Treadwell will try to live in nature and be an environmentalist, whether we cannot live in nature and nature is too harsh. That's Herzog's point of view. And there's lots of other things going on here. This is a religious movie, people. Go watch it. It's amazing how he does this and puts it all together. Grizzly Man, one of the best documentaries, I think, ever made.
It is the old bear, one who is struggling for survival, and an aggressive one at that, who is the one that you must be very careful of. For these are the bears that on occasion do, for survival, kill and eat humans.
My number 2 movie is a collaboration between Herzog and the great actor Klaus Kinski, who I've already mentioned in this video. It's a movie I think that has one of the greatest passages I've ever seen. Nosferatu the Vampire. Now this is a remake of F.W. Murnau's classic Nosferatu, a great silent movie which you should watch. Herzog redoes it and I think does a lot better at making the Dracula story come alive. It is based on Bram Stoker's original Dracula novel. Herzog tweaks it quite a bit, and in this case, the Dracula has all the power and humans have almost no power at all. So Dracula, like all the other subjects that Herzog films, whether it's the Kuwaiti oil fields fires, Klaus Kinski himself, the enigma of Caspar Hauser, Antarctica, volcanoes, you name it. The vampire is that kind of figure, the unknowable beyond, the thing in nature that's a predator of humans and can kill them, the thing that's fascinating to look at, yet terrifying is at the same time. Nosferatu has a passage in this movie. There's a passage in this movie that is absolutely wonderful. It's when Jonathan Harker goes to Transylvania to meet Nosferatu. I think that's the best passage in all of Herzog's movies. Go watch it. Nosferatu, the vampire. Before I move on to number 1 on my list, I'd like to mention number 1B. I watched this movie after I made the video, and then I realized I think this movie encapsulates all of Herzog. It's a documentary called The White Diamond. Herzog uses this documentary to talk about human folly, humans striving to find the unknown. He deals with what he calls in the documentary stupid stupidities. He even inserts himself into the documentary to fly in an airship that might crash. The documentary The White Diamond is in part about an inventor who wants to reignite airships, air travel via Zeppelin types of airships that are filled with gas. He goes down to South America to realize his dream, just as Herzog has in a couple of his previous movies, including Fitzcarraldo. Herzog follows this scientist, but finds locals who are diamond miners who are really interesting people, and they help not just the scientist out, but also Herzog. So you get themes of colonialism and what the third world is like, something that Herzog has pursued throughout his life. There's sort of a story in The White Diamond, but there's not a story. Herzog ruminates on a waterfall that behind it has a nesting place for swifts, and he films those swifts, and so many of those images are absolutely beautiful. But this place behind the waterfall is mysterious, nobody's been back there, and so some of the striving in this movie is to get behind that waterfall to the dark unknown to see where the swifts nest and what exactly is behind this humongous force of nature, which is the waterfall. That's all I'm going to say about the documentary, but it has some of Herzog's best images, and it may have the best soundtrack he's ever done. Heck, one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard. So to me, this is in the upper crust of the pantheon of Herzog movies, and it's maybe his best documentary, The White Diamond. Certainly it competes with Grizzly Man, in my view.
Out of curiosity, our physician on location, an expert mountain climber, decided to have a look for himself. He wanted to see the mysterious nesting place of the swifts. From the bottom of the falls, the gigantic cave is inaccessible and has resisted all attempts by explorers.
My number 1 on this list would not be a number 1 on any other critic's list, I think, but I put it here for a reason, and that's because this movie, Cave of Forgotten Dreams, ought to last forever. Herzog has done humanity a great service by taking his camera into the Lascaux Caves, which were painted about 40,000 years ago, in which a great artist or series of artists did amazing things by painting animals on cave walls and understanding how the lights and the shadows worked in that cave. Herzog takes his camera in there and films it. Now, nobody can go in there, no tourists are allowed, but thanks to Herzog's documentary, which is very well done, by the way, you can see the art of the Lascaux cave paintings. So thank you, Werner Herzog, for filming it. Thank you for preserving this art for humanity. One of the things that comes up in this movie is, can we ever understand a work of art? Can we ever know what these Lascaux cave painters were getting at? And the answer is they're just as enigmatic as every other subject that Herzog films in his other movies. And yet the art remains, and it is remarkable. So go watch a Werner Herzog movie. Thanks for watching my top 10 list. Go watch my other videos, please, and subscribe to my channel. Subscribe. Thanks a lot for watching. Have a great day.